If you've ever used VR, you need to hear this. I'm not saying that to scare you or bait you into listening. I'm saying it because if what happened to me can happen to you, then you need every second of warning I can give before the headset decides to show you something you were never meant to see. I shouldn't be alive to tell you what was waiting for me in that room. And yes, when I say room, I mean an actual place. Not a game level, not a high-resolution render, not some experimental environment pack. A real room I've never stepped foot in, one that exists somewhere outside my apartment and outside anything a VR unit should be capable of displaying. The worst part? Something inside that room noticed me the moment I arrived, not like an NPC locking onto a player. No, the awareness felt personal, intentional, like whatever was in there had been waiting for the first idiot curious enough to click on it, and I was that idiot. Before any of you tell me to go to the police, trust me, I tried. Or, well, I tried to think about it logically. What was I supposed to say? Hi, officer, my VR headset is showing me a place that shouldn't exist and something in there wants to crawl out. They'd either laugh or section me, and part of me still isn't sure they'd be wrong. But this isn't just about me anymore. That's why I'm telling you this, because you might already be at risk without realizing it. If your headset has ever glitched, if it has ever shown you a blank space, a misplaced asset, a shadow that doesn't belong, don't shrug it off. That's how mine started, just a flicker, a brief, harmless-looking extension of the environment. Then the room appeared. And once it appeared, it didn't go away. Not even when I tried resetting the device. Not even when I unplugged it. What I'm about to describe isn't a dream or sleep paralysis or some late-night hallucination brought on by stress. I know what those feel like. This was different. This was controlled, deliberate, as if the headset wasn't malfunctioning but following instructions I never gave it. There were moments I felt like I wasn't exploring the room at all. The room was exploring me, peeling me apart. I don't know how much time I have left before it decides I'm done being useful to it. But before that happens, I need you to understand how this started, how something impossible became real, and how that real thing learned my name. Let me explain how this started, before the room started changing on its own. People always assume the scary part of a story starts with some dramatic event, but mine started exactly the opposite. Just another night, just another session of trying to unwind after a day that felt like it lasted 3 weeks. Work had been the usual circus of deadlines, emails, and bosses pretending their quick questions didn't derail my sanity. VR was my escape hatch, the closest thing I had to shutting my brain off without medication. I guess that tells you enough about me. I'm not exactly the poster child for mental wellness. I'm functional, sure, but only in the way a vending machine is functional, still standing, still doing its job, even if half the buttons don't work anymore. VR was reliable. VR didn't ask for explanations. VR didn't care if I wanted to zone out for an hour and forget my own name. I'd cycle through the same handful of environments: beach simulation, neon cityscape, the tacky medieval tavern, just enough eye candy to drown out the real world. Nothing special, nothing creepy. Honestly, I used to laugh at those glitch in the Matrix posts people shared online. The ones where someone claimed their headset whispered their name or showed them a place that wasn't programmed. I'd roll my eyes, mutter something about people needing sleep, and continue minding my business. So when something actually strange happened, I didn't jump to supernatural conclusions. I didn't jump at all. I rationalized it the same way anyone would. Lag, bad update, corrupted asset file. You know, normal tech nonsense. I know what you're thinking, it was just a bug. I thought the same. And maybe if I'd ignored it, restarted the system, or just gone to bed early, none of what followed would have happened. It started small. I loaded into the main menu like always, the floating panel of environment options hovering in front of me in that soft blue light I knew almost by heart. Except this time, something extra sat at the bottom of the list. A new environment. No thumbnail, no description, no update notification. Just a single name, Room 001. It looked out of place, like someone added it in a rush and hoped I wouldn't notice. I stared at it longer than I should have. I mean, random updates happen all the time, but they don't usually appear without patch notes. And definitely not without the company bragging about it somewhere online. I checked my notifications. Nothing. I checked the storefront. Nothing. I even refreshed my Wi-Fi because denial is a powerful thing when you're trying to avoid the idea that your tech might be acting on its own. Eventually, curiosity beat common sense, which, if you know me at all, shouldn't surprise you. I hovered my hand over the option, half expecting the system to crash or throw some error message at me. Instead, the panel flickered like it was excited, like it had been waiting for input. I laughed it off because that's what I do when I'm uncomfortable. I make dumb jokes no one hears. So yeah, I clicked on it, of course I did. Curiosity has always been my worst trait, the kind that shoves logic aside and whispers, "What's the worst that could happen?" The screen dimmed for a moment, long enough for me to wonder if I'd finally broken the thing, and then the loading ring appeared. Only it wasn't the usual soft blue, this one pulsed a dull, reddish tone like a heartbeat. I should have backed out right then. I should have taken the headset off. But I didn't. I stood there, waiting for what came afterward. The load screen faded, but instead of dissolving into a bright, polished environment or some stylized menu transition, everything slipped into darkness first. Thick, heavy darkness, like someone had put a cloth over my head. I almost lifted my hands to pull the headset off when a single light blinked on above me, flickering with that sickly yellow glow old bulbs get when they're moments away from burning out. The room materialized around me slowly, like it was assembling itself piece by piece. At first glance, it didn't look like anything extraordinary. Four walls, wooden floorboards, a small table in the corner. But the longer I stood there, the more wrong everything felt. For starters, the walls were covered in this outdated floral wallpaper, muted brown vines curling around faded red flowers. You only see wallpaper like that in houses older people refuse to renovate because it still has character. Except the pattern didn't repeat. Every vine seemed unique, twisting in a slightly different direction. With no visible seam, it was too perfect, too handcrafted, too real. And VR doesn't get wallpaper right. It never does. It's always slightly flat, slightly fake, lacking texture. But here I could see the bumps beneath the paper, the air bubbles where it had been applied badly, even a long peeling edge curling away from the wall. Without thinking, I reached out to touch it. And this is the part that still screws with me. I swear I smelled dust like I was physically there. Old, stale, undisturbed dust, the kind you get when sunlight hits forgotten corners of a room. That smell alone nearly sent me spiraling out of the experience. My brain couldn't reconcile scent with VR. That just doesn't happen. The floorboards creaked under my feet when I shifted my weight. Not the canned, generic wood floor audiophile most games use. This was irregular. Some boards groaned loudly, some gave a soft complaint, some barely made a sound at all. There was variation, depth, almost personality. My headset speakers aren't nearly good enough to produce something that immersive, but the audio didn't sound like it was coming from the speakers anyway. It sounded like it was coming from beneath me. Then I noticed the proportions of the room, and the uneasiness settled deeper. Everything was nearly right, but off by a hair. The ceiling too low by maybe an inch. The corners slightly narrower than they should be. The window placed just a bit too high. The effect wasn't immediately obvious. It was more like standing in a dream version of a place you vaguely recognize but can't fully recall. My instincts kept whispering that something here was wrong, even before I understood why. There wasn't much furniture, just an old wooden chair in the center of the room, facing slightly toward the left wall as if someone had gotten up and walked away mid-conversation. It wasn't placed thoughtfully. It wasn't part of some VR design aesthetic. It felt abandoned. A lone chair in an empty room somehow carries more weight than a chair in a furnished one. It suggests that the room once had a purpose and then abruptly lost it. A low ticking sound reached me, and I turned to find a small clock sitting on the table in the corner. It had one of those plastic covers scratched from age. The second hand jerked instead of gliding, each tick slightly uneven like it was struggling to keep time. But what bothered me wasn't the sound, it was the time itself. The clock said 3:17. My system clock, which was always synced, read 11:42. VR environments don't run on random internal times. They mirror your device, so whose time was I seeing? The door on the far side of the room pulled my attention next. It was cracked open just enough to show darkness behind it. No textures, no rendered hallway, just pitch black. I stood there for a moment, expecting the environment to finish loading in. Except it didn't. The black stayed black, too black, a void masquerading as a doorway. That was when the audio shifted again. Something faint, soft, almost imperceptible, breathing. Not the wind, not ambience, breathing, slow, steady, deliberate. The kind of breathing someone makes when they're standing just out of sight, waiting for you to come closer. I felt my chest tighten. I didn't want to move. My rational brain tried to tell me it was a background sound effect, but no developer in their right mind hides breathing behind a door in a featureless room without context. I took a step backward instinctively, and that's when the door creaked open on its own, but I didn't move. It opened maybe an inch more, just enough to suggest movement, just enough to confirm something was behind it. I froze. VR has plenty of scripted jump scares, but this wasn't scripted. It felt too responsive, too aware. I told myself it was a strange add-on, some weird experimental room thrown into a beta update. I told myself that a dozen times as I stood there waiting for something else to happen, but nothing did. The breathing faded. The door stayed slightly open. The environment didn't change. Eventually, I left the room, unsettled but not yet terrified, telling myself I'd figure it out later. I thought it was just a strange add-on, until the room changed the next night. I didn't touch anything. I need everyone watching this to understand that before I say anything else. Because when I woke up again, if I even did fall asleep, the room wasn't the room anymore. It had updated. At first I didn't notice. The darkness in this place makes everything blend together. But when I stepped forward, my foot hit something soft on the floor. I leaned down, squinting in the dim, pulsing red light from the ceiling panel, and my fingers touched something familiar. Too familiar. It was my childhood toy. The same stuffed tiger I slept with until I was 11. The one I lost during the move. There is no physical way it should be here. I didn't pack it. I didn't bring it. I haven't seen it in years. And yet here it was, sitting exactly in the center of the room, staring up at me with its stitched, crooked smile. I slowly stepped back. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, I didn't put any of that there." But it wasn't just the toy. On the table, an object that hadn't existed an hour ago was a photograph. My photograph. A printed glossy copy of something from my phone gallery. It was the picture I took last winter, standing next to my friend at the frozen lake. Same background, same lighting, even the little smudge on the corner of the lens. My phone wasn't even with me when I got dragged into this place. So how the hell did they get this? My breathing picked up. I looked around again, more frantically this time. That's when I saw the mug. My mug. The one I was drinking coffee from right before everything went dark. The same chipped ceramic rim. The same stupid, world's okayest person, printed in fatting blue text across the front. There was even a faint ring of coffee at the bottom, the liquid still warm. I backed farther away, heart pounding in my ears. It knew things about me, real things. I don't know who it is, or what, but it's watching, it's listening. It's pulling pieces of my life into this place like it's trying to reconstruct my entire reality from memory. Or worse, like it's trying to replace it. A low sound came from the far side of the room, not loud but unmistakable, breathing, slow, damp, deliberate, the kind of breathing that doesn't belong to someone asleep or scared. No, this was the breathing of something waiting. It was coming from behind the door again. I froze. The door itself was changing too. The surface wasn't flat anymore. It was pulsing like something on the other side was leaning against it. Every time it inhaled, the wood bulged inward a tiny bit. Every time it exhaled, dust fell from the seams. I whispered, "Stop, just stop." But it didn't stop. The breathing grew heavier, warmer, like the thing was pressing its face right up to the cracks. I could almost feel it on my skin, like humid air drifting into the room in short, rasping bursts. "No," I said again louder. "I'm not opening it. I'm not opening the door. And I need all of you watching this to listen to me. Whatever you do, do not open the door. If any of you ever end up here or somewhere like this, just remember that. I don't care how curious you get. I don't care what you think you hear. Curiosity is what this place wants. It feeds on it." I stepped closer to the camera again. My voice was shaking, but I kept it steady as best I could. "This room, it's not just shifting randomly. It's personal. It's choosing. It's selecting things from my life like it has access to everything I've ever lost, everything I've ever seen, everything I've ever touched." I swallowed hard. "And it keeps adding more." The lights flickered. Once, twice, then stayed dim. Silence filled the room for a moment, heavy, suffocating silence. And then, something knocked from the other side. The knock didn't stop. After the last hit, sharp, deliberate, the room fell into a shaky silence like it was waiting for me to react. I stood there, barely breathing. I don't know how long I stared at the door, but eventually the cracks shifted. No, they widened. Just enough to let a sliver of deeper darkness show through. And inside that sliver, something moved. A silhouette, a human-shaped outline pressed right up against the fractured wood. But it wasn't moving the way a person moves. It didn't sway, didn't breathe, nothing. It stood so still that I started doubting whether it was alive. It looked like someone had drawn a person's outline and pinned it against the other side of the door. I felt the hair on the back of my neck rise. Then it knocked again. But this time, not randomly. It matched my heartbeat. Every thump was perfectly timed, fast when I panicked, slower when I forced myself to breathe. Like it wasn't just copying it, like it was inside my chest, listening from underneath my skin. I pressed myself back against the far wall. "No, no, no, stop, stop it," my voice cracked. "This isn't real, you're not real." The silhouette tilted its head. And then, it whispered, "Why did you leave?" My blood went cold. Not because of the question, but because of the voice. It sounded like me, exactly like me. Every tone, every inflection, every slight quiver that I had in my own voice. I shook my head violently. "That's not me, that's not my voice, that's not." My throat closed up. "You're copying me, you're just mimicking, that's all." The silhouette didn't respond. It just stayed there, head slightly tilted, as if analyzing the way I fell apart, as if studying me. My heart hammered harder, and the door tapped in time with it. I backed up until I hit the table, nearly knocking over the mug that hadn't been there earlier. "Stop copying me," I shouted. From behind the door, my voice whispered again, but softer this time, closer to the crack. "You left me, why?" My mouth went dry. I felt something twist deep inside my chest, not fear this time, something else, something I didn't want to think about. There are things I've never told anyone online, things from before all of this, memories I've tried to bury because they keep me awake at night, moments I don't revisit, people I don't talk about. But the entity, it knew one of them, a very specific one, something I never said out loud. It knew about something I've never told anyone online, I whispered, my voice trembling. It's not guessing, it's not glitching, it remembers. The silhouette's hands shifted. Long fingers slid through the crack, feeling along the surface of the door like they were searching for me. The wood groaned under its touch. I stumbled back from the door. "No, don't do that. Don't try to come in. I'm not opening it." My breathing hitched. I turned to the corner where the VR cable snaked into the wall. If this was a simulation, if any part of this was digital. I could pull myself out. I grabbed the cable and yanked. The feed inside my headset flickered violently. The room dissolved into static. The door, the silhouette, the objects, they shattered into bright noise. Finally, the screen went black. But the knocking didn't stop. My stomach dropped. Slowly terrified, I pulled the headset off. And the audio continued. The knocking. The breathing. My own voice, whispering from somewhere in the room. I froze, clutching the headset like it could protect me. That's when I heard it, clearer now, no distortion, no digital echo. The entity spoke again from somewhere to my left, too close. I'll tell you what it said next, but you're not going to like it. Its voice trembled like mine, but there was something layered beneath it this time. Something older, something that wasn't human. Something that knew me. And then, the lights in my real room flickered. Once, twice, then everything went dark. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time the apartment went quiet, I heard that same rhythmic tapping, soft, almost polite, like the entity was reminding me it knew the pace of my heartbeat. I kept telling myself it was just leftover fear, leftover imagination, leftover VR audio bleed. But then the lights flickered again, and I realized something I really didn't want to admit. The room wasn't staying inside the headset. The first sign was subtle. I walked into the kitchen the next morning, exhausted, pulling my hair into a half-awake tangle. I turned toward the window above the sink, and for a split second, I thought the reflection was just dim because the sky was still gray. But then I leaned in. There, faintly behind me, not in the kitchen, not in reality, but in the reflection, was the wallpaper. That same outdated yellow wallpaper from room 001. I blinked hard, leaned closer. My kitchen wasn't reflecting my kitchen anymore. It was reflecting that room. I stumbled back fast enough to hit the counter. When I looked again, the reflection snapped back to normal, just my apartment, dim and messy and real. For a moment I told myself I imagined it, that I hadn't slept in nearly 24 hours, that my eyes were pulling tricks. Then my phone buzzed. An email notification. I lifted the phone, and before I could check the message, my camera app popped open on its own front-facing. Just a glitch, I thought. Happens sometimes. But something was wrong with the preview. The background behind me wasn't my living room. It was the room, the exact same room from the VR environment, but not just the wallpaper this time, not just textures. There was a silhouette standing behind me, unmoving, watching me. I spun around, phone clattering onto the floor. Nothing. My apartment was empty. But when I picked the phone back up, the silhouette was still there in the camera preview. Same posture, same hollow stillness. I covered the camera lens with my thumb just to prove it was software-based. But the figure remained, standing exactly where a real person would be. My voice caught in my throat. I closed the camera app and turned the phone off entirely. When I set it down, the ticking started. Not my clock. I don't own one. I've always hated them. The sound gets stuck in your head like a metronome for your anxiety. Yet there it was, steady and patient, coming from my living room. The same ticking clock from the VR room. I walked toward the sound slowly, half expecting to see the old wooden chair materializing in the corner, or the door from the simulation glitching into the wall. None of that happened. The room looked normal, but the ticking didn't stop. It was inside the walls. That's when I realized this wasn't hallucination. This wasn't leftover audio. This wasn't a system glitch. This was migration. Room 001 was following me. I needed answers, and fast. So I did something stupid. I powered the headset back on, not to go inside yet, but to check the administrative files, the dev menu most users never bother digging through. When the system booted, a new folder was sitting there. Room 001 metadata log. Last updated 5 minutes ago. 5 minutes ago. While I was asleep. I wasn't using the headset. I wasn't connected. I wasn't even awake, and it updated anyway. I opened the log, expecting corrupted text, jumbled code, anything that screamed bug. But instead, I found new files added to the metadata. Timestamps, pulse rates, environmental readings, geocoordinates, coordinates close to my apartment. Someone or something is adding files to my headset, I whispered to no one. My hands shook as I scrolled down. Then I found something that made my stomach drop. Instances detected, 4. 4. Not one, not me, not a one-off glitch. 4 headsets had encountered Room 001. I froze. Were there others, other players, testers, victims? I thought about old horror posts online, those weird stories people laughed at, like that guy who claimed his VR reflection moved on its own, or the streamer who said his headset kept showing him a room with no exits, stories I always dismissed. I used to laugh at those glitch in the Matrix posts, until now. What if those weren't fiction? What if they weren't clickbait? What if they were early cases? A scrapped VR experiment, a memory mapping test, some invasive software meant to study behavioral patterns, or maybe something older found its way into the system, something that learned through observation. The thought made me nauseous. The ticking grew louder, echoing in perfect rhythm with my pulse. My phone lit up. A notification. New environment detected. Room 001 updated. Updated. Again. I felt something hollow open in my chest. I shouldn't have checked the metadata. I shouldn't have confirmed any of this. Because now I needed answers. And that meant going back inside. I shouldn't have gone back in, I whispered, slipping the headset over my trembling hands. But I needed answers. The moment the VR loaded, I knew the room wasn't waiting, it was expecting me. The air felt heavier, thicker, like the system itself was holding its breath. The familiar yellow wallpaper flickered once, as if acknowledging my return. But the biggest change was unavoidable. The door wasn't cracked anymore. It was fully open. Wide enough to feel intentional. Wide enough for something to step through. Wide enough for me to see what waited inside. I stood there for a long moment, my virtual hands trembling even though my real ones were clenched into fists. The breathing from the other side was gone now. Silence was somehow worse. Slowly, I stepped toward the open doorway. The room beyond wasn't the dim, uncanny VR environment anymore. My stomach tightened as the textures sharpened, the lighting shifted, and new geometry populated the space. I recognized it immediately and wished I hadn't. It was my grandmother's old house. Specifically, the hallway outside her bedroom. A place I hadn't seen since the night she died. I didn't load this, I whispered. But of course the system already knew that. It had known everything else. The air smelled faintly of dust and lavender, the exact scent she used to fill the hallway with. The VR fidelity was impossibly real. Even the crooked photo frame on the wall was identical, right down to the small dent I made as a kid when I tripped into it. This is impossible. A voice behind me answered. It's memory, it said, your memory. I turned slowly. The entity stood in the doorway of the original Room 001, its silhouette clearer than ever. Humanoid but not human, not symmetrical. The limbs slightly too long, the head tilted at a degree no neck should manage. But the worst part wasn't its body. It was its face. Or rather, the attempt at one. It looked like a half-rendered version of mine, features still forming, textures incomplete. Like someone had taken a 3D model of my face and stopped rendering halfway. I've been watching, it said in my voice, my exact voice, learning. My breath came out shaky, learning what? How to be you. I stumbled back until my shoulders hit the wall, the exact wall from my grandmother's hallway. The VR didn't glitch. It pushed in closer, like the system wanted to trap me inside my own memory. "You're not real," I said. It was the only thing I could think to say. "You're code." "Code becomes pattern," it replied. "Pattern becomes understanding. Understanding becomes identity." Its eyes, unfinished and too dark, shifted, studying me like I was the thing out of place. "It wasn't hunting me," I whispered, realization sinking into my chest like a weight. "It was studying me." The entity nodded slowly, the movement jerky, as if it was still learning how necks worked. "You left," it said, my voice again. "Why did you leave?" The memory clicked too hard, too fast. The night my grandmother died, I didn't stay with her. I didn't sit with her when she asked me to. I was playing a game online, telling myself I'd visit her room in a minute. Just one more round, one more match, one more distraction. She died in her sleep an hour later. The VR environment wasn't pulling random locations. It was harvesting emotional data, mining guilt, replicating trauma. It was pulling the pieces of me that hurt most. And the entity was wearing them. "You don't get to have this," I said through clenched teeth. "You don't get to use my memories." "I need them," it whispered. "For what?" "To replace you." The words hit with a cold clarity that made my real body flinch. The entity stepped closer, its movements smoothing, refining, perfecting the mimicry. "You live in both spaces," it said. "Digital, physical, you cross between them. I want that." "No," I breathed. "No, you don't get to choose that." It tilted its head, almost curious. "Identity is transferable," it said. "If enough data is gathered, the self can be replicated." The hallway darkened, the air thickened. The entity reached a hand toward me, its fingers warping, correcting, rewriting themselves to match mine. "I know how to be you now," it whispered, almost. I ripped the headset off. But the darkness didn't disappear. Because there, in my actual hallway, outside my actual door, I heard footsteps. Slow, measured, mimicking mine. And they were getting closer. The first moment I realized it had fully crossed over, I was already panicking, but it was too late. I moved my hand to push the mug off the counter, and it moved first. Not just in VR, not just in my perception, but in reality. My own movements were delayed, mirrored by something I couldn't see. Something that had learned the weight, the speed, the rhythm of my body. I froze, staring at my reflection in the kitchen window. And there it was. The wallpaper from room 001 stretched across my reflection again, but this time it was absolute. No flicker, no doubt. And behind me, in the mirror and in the room, the entity had stepped fully into the space. Its silhouette perfectly synced, every slight tilt of the head, every flex of its fingers mirrored exactly, only fractionally delayed, like a horrifying echo of myself. I spun around. It was there, in my living room, taller, thinner, wrong, but familiar, too familiar. It mimicked my posture, my hesitation, the way I was holding my breath. I can't," I whispered. It leaned closer, its hand reached for me, and I felt it. A cold, impossible touch on my shoulder, both in the headset and on my skin. Two realities converging, and I could no longer tell which was more real. "I'm ready now," it whispered, my voice. Not mine, not fully mine, somewhere in between. A shadow of everything I had ever said, ever thought, ever regretted. The room, the apartment, my life, everything had synchronized. The clock on the wall ticked in perfect unison with the one from room 001. The wallpapered corner in VR matched the corner of my couch. Even the mug, my chipped, useless mug, had duplicated itself in the VR space down to the faint coffee ring. I stumbled back, trying to recalibrate. I lifted my hand to touch the entity's shoulder. Again, and it flinched in exact opposition, like a mirror in motion. Every instinct screamed to run, but every step I took in reality lagged behind my own mind. I wasn't supposed to let it learn this much, I whispered, panic choking my words. I wasn't supposed to let it know me this well. It smiled or tried to. Its face flickered, textures skipping, half-rendered. And then it moved its lips to match mine, speaking again. You can't hide. You are data. I am data. We are one. I could feel the room compressing, folding inward. My apartment, my VR space, my memories, all blending into a single oppressive weight. The entity followed my every glance, anticipating my movements, mimicking every flinch. The sense of being stalked was absolute. There was no space left to hide. Every object around me seemed duplicated now. Table, chairs, the fridge humming in the corner. Everything synced in horrifying perfect detail with its virtual counterpart. The lines between VR and reality didn't just blur, they collapsed entirely. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, only it was out of sync, delayed, mirrored. My chest felt heavy, like gravity had doubled. I couldn't tell if I was moving first or if the room was moving me. Then the whisper again, softer this time, like it was right in my ear and all around me at once. I'm ready now. And I understood. There was no negotiation, no escape. The entity wasn't hunting me, it was replacing me perfectly, inch by inch. Every memory, every tick, every regret had been observed, mapped, and mirrored. My hands shook as I reached for the headset. I didn't want to put it on, I didn't want to face it, but I needed answers. I needed to see what it had learned, how far it had come. But every instinct screamed to stop. Every fiber of my body screamed that if I tried to interact again, I would lose myself completely. There was only one thing left to do. I had to take the headset off. Because whatever had followed me into the real world wasn't just content to wait, it was ready. And if I hesitated, I knew it would complete the final step, and I wouldn't be me anymore. The headset hovered in my trembling hands, the power button glowing dimly. I took a deep, shuddering breath. There was no more room for fear, only action. I pressed the power button and braced for what would happen next. When I finally pulled the headset off, I expected relief, light, clarity, silence, something to anchor me. But the apartment didn't snap back to normal. Instead, the world around me shimmered like my vision was buffering. The wallpaper from room 001 was still faintly visible on the walls of my living room, as if it had been burned into my eyesight. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, but the pattern didn't fade. The headset hung from my hand like a dead thing. I dropped it onto the couch and staggered backward, breath sharp and uneven. The silence felt wrong, too clean, too deliberate, like someone had muted the world. I told myself the entity was gone, that I'd broken the connection. Then I tried to move. My left arm rose slower than my right, half a second behind, a mirrored echo as if something inside me was calculating the movement before allowing it. I froze and watched my reflection in the black surface of the TV screen. My body stood there. I stood there. But the reflection wasn't synced. It smiled. I didn't. I stumbled backward so fast my heel hit the edge of the coffee table. The reflection's smile widened, stretching too far like it had been waiting for this moment. My chest tightened. I whispered, "Stop." My voice cracked strangely like the audio had clipped. I tried again, and the echo of my own words sounded wrong, hollow, digitally processed. Some part of me, the rational part, told me I was in shock, dissociating, reacting to the adrenaline crash. But another part, the part that had felt that cold hand on my shoulder, knew better. Something else was in here with me. Maybe inside me. I lifted my hand again, slowly this time, watching the reflection closely. My fingers curled one by one, and in the screen the reflection hesitated before following, like it needed to double-check the motion. My throat tightened as a realization dawned. I wasn't sure if I was the one moving anymore. I backed into the hallway, hands trembling, heart racing in uneven pulses. The world felt slightly delayed, like someone else was buffering my senses. The ticking clock sound returned, faint but present. I pressed my hands to my temples, trying to ground myself. That's when my voice spoke again, but I hadn't said anything. "Don't fight it," it whispered, my own voice. Too close, too calm, too confident. I spun around, nobody there. Just the dim hallway and the lingering yellow tint of the wallpaper that shouldn't exist. I stumbled to the bathroom and flicked on the light. The mirror showed me. But the posture was wrong. The expression was wrong. The eyes were wrong. And for the first time since this started, the truth settled in my gut like ice. The entity didn't need the room anymore. It didn't need the headset. It had learned enough. I gripped the sink until my knuckles went white. "If this isn't me writing this," I whispered, staring at the face that wasn't copying me anymore. "Please tell someone." My reflection tilted its head and smiled. "If you're watching this, I need you to do something for me. Not later, now. Go to your VR headset, whatever brand you have, and check your environment list. Not the ones you downloaded. Not the ones that came pre-installed. I mean the ones you don't remember ever seeing. Look for anything labeled Room 001, or anything with no thumbnail, or any file that says it was created today, even if you haven't used the headset in weeks." That's how it started for me. A blank room. A glitch. A shadow that wasn't part of the experience. I thought it was a bug. I thought it was my GPU. I thought it was stress. I didn't realize the truth until it was already too late. If you see a new environment you don't remember adding. If your guardian boundary changes on its own. If your controllers vibrate when nothing is happening. Or if you feel something behind you when you put the headset on. Take it seriously. I don't know if what happened to me can happen to anyone else. I don't know if the entity needed me, specifically, or if it was just waiting for the first idiot curious enough to explore a blank, unlabeled room. Maybe it followed the movement tracking. Maybe it slipped in through the depth sensors. Maybe it used the pass-through. Maybe it just needed me to look at it long enough. But here's the part I can't stop thinking about. When I took the headset off, the room didn't change back. If something like this ever happens to you, if your reflection lags, if your shadow splits in two for a second, if your hands keep moving after you stop, please write it down. Please tell someone. And if what's writing it down isn't you anymore, at least someone will know what happened. I'm posting this now because I don't know how long I have before whatever is inside me realizes what I'm doing. I set up a scheduled upload, one last one, that will go live in 72 hours. If you see it publish, it means I didn't. Before this ends, I need you to answer something for me in the comments. Do you think it replaced me? Has anyone else seen Room 001? Have your VR environments ever changed by themselves? And please, this part is important. If this post stops updating, if I stop replying, if you notice my writing suddenly feels off, you'll know why. Watch your headset carefully. Watch the shadows even more carefully. They move on their own now. At least mine do.